Hello everyone and welcome to the Advanced Mass Marketing Fraud Case Studies from the U.S. Postal Inspection Service webinar. My name is Jane Lee and I'm the Director of the Financial Crime Resource Center, which is a program of the National Center for Victims of Crime. Our mission is to forge a national commitment to help victims of crime rebuild their lives, whether it's a violent crime or financial fraud. We work with wonderful partners throughout the country, including the Department of Justice, to provide training and education. This webinar is presented to you in partnership with the FINRA and FINRA Investor Education Foundation. The FINRA Investor Education Foundation provides grants and manages targeted projects focused on investor education and protection. Before we get started, I would like to introduce to you our webinar presenters, Sharon Miller and Kathy Martin-Jack. Sharon Miller has served as a U.S. Postal Inspection Service General Analyst for 6 years and has over 32 years of U.S. Postal Service experience. Ms. Miller provides assistance to the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania fraud team with the development of USPIS investigations through research, document review, and analysis to identify victims and victim losses. In addition, Ms. Miller provides extensive assistance with grand jury and trial preparation to the creation of court exhibits and witness coordination. Ms. Miller was a co-recipient of the 2015 Crime Victims Financial Restoration Award that was awarded by the Department of Justice Office for Victims of Crime. The National Crime Victims Service Award recognized the team's efforts for exceptional innovation in securing financial restoration for crime victims. The investigation centered on the activities of MoneyGram International Incorporated, a money service business, and their ineffective anti-money laundering program. The team identified over 66,000 victims and to date has returned approximately $65 million to victims. Our second presenter is Kathy Martin-Jack. Kathy is a U.S. Postal Inspection Service's National Victim Specialist, a position she has held since 2013. Prior to that, she worked as a consumer fraud analyst assigned to the Tucson, Arizona domicile for 4 years. In 2008, she retired from the Tucson, Arizona Police Department after 29 years, where she held a number of positions, most notably as the department's analyst assigned to the fraud and elder abuse units, lending support to a variety of other units as needed. She is an original member of the department's Critical Incident Stress Debriefing Team, Peer Support Team, and Peer Support Steering Committee. Today, she works out of the Cleveland domicile, where she provides victim support across the country, primarily for senior victims of mail fraud. She holds a BS in criminal justice and is certified as an adjunct professor at Pima Community College in Arizona. She is a certified fraud specialist, certified crime analyst, certified specialty law enforcement instructor for fraud and elder abuse, and past president of the International Association of Law Enforcement Intelligent Analysts Southwest Chapter. Without further ado, Sharon and Kathy. Sharon, if you would kindly unmute yourself.
There are a number of issues facing Americans as they plan for retirement, care for older loved ones, and seek quality of life as they age. As part of the 2015 White House Conference on Aging, the Department of Justice made a commitment to collaborate with wide-range federal agencies, including the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, to develop and promote elder abuse and financial exploitation training for prosecutors, victim specialists, and law enforcement. In conjunction with the Department of Justice Elder Justice Initiative, the U.S. Postal Service is presenting this webinar as part of the important effort and would like to thank the National Center for Victims of Crime and the FINRA Investor Education Foundation for hosting. I am here with Kathy Martin-Jack. She is a National Victim Specialist for the United States Postal Inspection Service. Initial victim contact is usually with a postal inspector or a general analyst assigned to support the investigation. Some victims require further assistance and are referred to me. I see a lot of senior victims who have been scammed and have suffered a financial loss. They may not realize that they have been taken advantage of, or they may not want to acknowledge that they fell for a scam. I help them recognize that they have been victimized and that as victims, there are protections that they are entitled to and social services available to them. If family dynamics are good, I encourage the family to get involved. A positive approach is my best advice, and I offer guidance regarding assistance, directions on securing finances, and suggestions to keep from being re-victimized. But I don't do all the talking, I do a lot of listening. I offer compassion and a friendly ear to both the victim and the family. It does take teamwork. I'm part of a team to protect our senior victims. Help is directed from law enforcement through advocates and victim specialists like myself, through the Department of Aging, clergy members, and healthcare professionals. If you're a local police or Department of Aging and receive a call that someone just sent money through the mail and may have been scammed, we suggest you contact the local post office right away to try to intercept that mailing. The scammers are good. They do this for a living. They instruct the seniors to use the express mail, which is the post office's overnight delivery service. The U.S. Postal Inspection Service follows the Attorney General guidelines when dealing with victims. The guidelines outline the legal mandates regarding victims and offers clear guidance on how to carry out those responsibilities. You can download a copy from their website as posted. How victims are treated has a huge impact on their confidence in the criminal justice system and their ability to heal and to recover from crime. What type of scams do we see? The most common scams that affect seniors are the grandparent scams, the prize or sweepstakes scams, investment scams, romance scams, work from home scams. These are the ones that target the seniors, and we see them over and over again. The Postal Inspection Service investigates any cases where the U.S. mail is used as a nexus. Any use of the mail gives us authority to investigate these types of crimes. This webinar will focus specifically on prize and romance scams. Sweepstakes and lotteries, there is a difference. In prize scams, the mail can be used to send bogus entry forms. With big letters, "You have just won the sweepstakes." These victims will often receive a check accompanying that letter. They also get it overnight. What's the difference between a real thing and a scam? Legitimate sweepstakes specify no purchase is needed to win, and buying a product will not increase the chance of winning. No purchase or entry fee is required. You do have to pay to play a lottery. Only lotteries that are state-owned and operated are eligible to use the U.S. mail. Foreign lotteries violate U.S. law, which prohibits the cross-border sale or purchase of lottery tickets. The law applies whether the solicitation is made by phone or mail, and it includes those using domestic return address. Most foreign lotteries are phony, and there are no high-stakes payouts. But the high cost of playing is real, because lottery hustlers use bank account numbers to make unauthorized withdrawals or run up additional charges on their credit card accounts. And there are other penalties. A federal statute prohibits mailing lottery tickets, advertisements, or even payments to purchase tickets in a foreign lottery. The charges can be a $1,000 fine and 2 years in prison. I'm going to introduce you to a man named Larry. I met Larry several months ago. He went to the post office to mail an express mail. The window clerk was a little suspicious because Larry didn't know how to fill out the express, was putting a check in there, and didn't know what was going on. So Larry received an original letter in the mail that he won that he had a $5,600 check. and that he won $3 million and a Mercedes-Benz. He sent $5,000 using Western Union to pay for the customs fees, just as the letter told him. That wasn't enough. The scammers called Larry again. They told Larry, now you have to pay for the taxes. So Larry goes to his local bank, withdraws $60,000, gets a cashier's check, and that's what he takes to the post office. I'd be a little nervous carrying around a $60,000 check as well. That caught the window clerk's suspicions. Unfortunately, when seniors get this, they're lured by the prospect of instant wealth, and they respond to sweepstakes and lottery solicitations to the tune of $120 million a year. So we visited Larry, and we asked him what happened. He told us he won the lottery. So we, along with the PNC bank manager, visited Larry, along with his family member who happened to live right across the street. We got Larry to change his phone number, he ran a credit report, and he had his credit cards changed. But that didn't stop. Larry continued to get additional phone calls. So what we discovered was the phone company had somebody had access to his account online, and that would be the scammer. As soon as Larry changed that phone number, the scammer was calling Larry the very next day. The Postal Inspection Service advises consumers to beware of promotions that ask for credit card and bank account numbers. Do not write a check, do not wire money, do not send cash. Do not give out personally identifiable information such as a date of birth, social security number, driver's license, or zip code. Resist the urge to respond to an urgent request. Ignore the deadline to collect the prize. If the sweepstakes requires a purchase, it's a scam. You never have to pay to play when the sweepstakes is legitimate. The bottom line, ignore all phone and mail solicitations for foreign lottery and sweepstakes promotions. So what does the Postal Inspection Service do to combat these scams? We perform mail interdictions. The Postal Inspection Service has international mail service centers, or ISCs, in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Miami, and San Francisco airports, where federal law enforcement authorities, including the Customs and Border Protection, intercept and destroy millions of foreign lottery mailings by the truckload. Besides mail interdictions, the Postal Inspection Service employs a phone termination program in which we submit justification for the carrier to terminate the phone number. Back to Larry, when we finally got the number disconnected, the scammer couldn't get a hold of Larry. He went a step further. The scammer called the local police department, or the local pizza shop. The pizza shop delivered a pizza to Larry's house, along with a telephone, so they could talk to him. They didn't want to lose Larry. Larry was a $60,000 customer. We also train Postal Service employees to be alert to customers who receive a lot of standard, better known as junk mail, and express mail. Also, customers who purchase a lot of money orders or express mail them. So what's our advice for victims? The first thing we recommend, first and foremost, you have to cut off communication. If you get that phone number changed, the scammer can't reach you. You want to change the phone number and verify with the company that nobody has access to that number online. Most seniors don't have access to the internet. So when we see that the scammer has access to that number, we know that they talk to the phone company online and have access right away. We also suggest they get an answer machine or caller ID. Don't answer the phone unless you recognize the number. If it's important enough, that person will leave a message. Number two, you want to check your credit report. It's a free service once a year. Financial recovery starts with a credit report to assess the damage and set things right. Federal law allows you to get a free copy of your credit report every 12 months from each of the credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. If you request a report from a different agency every 4 months, you'll be able to check your report 3 times a year, all for free. To place a fraud alert, contact one of the 3 credit bureaus, and they will notify you the other 2. Their contact information is shown here. Number 3, you want to file a report with the police. If the victim sent a MoneyGram or a Western Union wire transfer, you want to contact them and file a report. Typically, they will ask you to file a police report first, so start with the police report. Second, file a complaint with Western Union or MoneyGram. If you send anything through the mail, contact your local post office. See if they can intercept that package. If you suspect fraud letters in the mail, you can drop them off at your local post office or call the Postal Inspection Service. If you have experienced fraud through the phone or through email, contact the Federal Trade Commission at 877-382-4357 or www.ftc.gov. Tips for advocates. First thing, cut off that communication and file a report. A senior may need assistance in changing their phone number, setting up an answer machine, checking credit reports, and filing complaints. This is where you can come in hand. Are the family dynamics good? Is the victim willing to let you contact family members? We do experience this from time to time. The senior's very, very embarrassed. They don't want their family to know that they just sent money. So you got to be careful on that one. It's best if you can notify family. Call them, explain the situation. Most times, they already know something is going on. They just don't know what to do. Offer suggestions. Let your loved one know you're willing to help them go forward. Don't lecture them. Don't embarrass them anymore. Direct family to seek legal advice regarding power of attorney, guardianship, or how to protect their loved one's assets. You can provide the family or the victim's family with information on social service agencies, the Area Agency on Aging, Catholic Charities, the United Way, for example. And you can encourage participation in outside activities. Suggest the victim find something else to occupy their time besides talking to scammers and entering sweepstakes. We notice a lot of senior citizens, if they're getting that junk mail, chances are they've already been scammed. Encourage the senior to get involved. Now this is good advice for all scams. The next scam we're going to talk about is a romance scam. They require extra care because of the intense feelings involved. Romance scams were most reported kind of online fraud last year, with victims swindled out of more than $14,000 is the average loss. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy.
Thank you, Sharon. Yes, that type of advice is good for all types of scams. The first thing I'd like to talk to you about is a victim I had contact with. Sharon actually referred Lewis to me. He's a rancher, 78 years old, and still actively working his ranch. He told me that he'd sent all of the money he would use to purchase his new calves to replenish his herd to his girlfriend, Abby, and he was having a hard time financially. In romance scams, generally we see the mail used to send money or other goods to the suspect, and that's how we get involved. Lewis and I spoke several times on the phone. We talked about social media and the security of your accounts, how to secure his Facebook account. We had several discussions on how Abby was a scammer and not a real person. He needed to understand that before he could take positive steps towards helping himself. I don't think that Lewis ever completely believed me about Abby, but he told me he wasn't sending her any more money. I did encourage him to get out, get involved in local activities in his community, and try to make some new friends that way. So who are the victims of romance scams? Well, research suggests that victims of romance scams have emotional or psychological vulnerabilities that make them susceptible to these types of schemes. They're looking for love, they overshare on social media sites, they have idealized notions of romance. These are the characteristics that are shared by victims, according to an Internet Crime Complaint Center report in 2014, and also a study that was conducted by researchers from the United Kingdom. According to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, women 50 and over are the most frequent victims of online romance scams. A report that was issued by the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center shows that they lost the most money. In 2014, more than 2,000 women in the United States, aged 50 and over, reported losing about $51 million to online romance crooks. On average, that was more than $23,500 each. Researchers in the United Kingdom found that men and women were victimized in almost equal numbers. It's just the women were more likely to report it to authorities. Underreporting is why it's difficult to quantify the scope of the problem. Law enforcement, social services, and victim advocates are trying to learn more about the psychological characteristics that put people at risk for fraud and to understand the physiological changes that come with aging, making our elders more susceptible to romance fraud and fraud in general. A variety of tactics are used to entrap victims and keep them believing. The scammers search dating websites, chat rooms, and social media websites for personal information that they can use to find and manipulate the victims. Some scammers purchase sucker lists from other scammers. They use well-rehearsed scripts to make themselves sound convincing, as well as taking copious notes as they speak with the victim. And the reason for that is so they can reference an earlier conversation when they speak to them later on. An online profile is created by the scammer, typically using photographs they've stolen off of the Internet. If the intended victim is a woman, the fake identity is usually that of a successful businessman, engineer, or member of the armed forces. To lure male victims, the fake profile is generally that of a teacher or a young student, and the stolen photo may be that of a model. This tactic is highly successful in attracting victims. So once contact's been made, the scammer moves the relationship to an email and develops what experts call a hyper-personal relationship. This means that they exchange daily emails, they share intimate details, and pseudo-vulnerabilities. The relationship appears exclusive, the communication is intense and frequent. It only takes a few weeks before the victim is in love with that scammer. Scammers use tactics similar to those employed by child exploiters who groom their victim. Emotional grooming elicits a strong instinctual response that intensifies the relationship. The groomed victim becomes adept at suppressing any feelings of doubt or skepticism. Before long, this relationship entails a request for money. Characteristically, the scam begins with a small amount and then moves to larger sums, usually in connection with a pretend crisis. Other characters may then be introduced, typically a diplomat, a customs official, or a doctor. These persons of authority are brought in to add credibility. The inclusion of topical news stories makes the tale seem more real to the victim. Adding to the genuine nature of their relationship, the scammer might email a fake airline ticket so the two can meet face-to-face. But they never do meet face-to-face. And after the victims paid out large amounts of money, they begin to get frustrated that the relationship hasn't moved from the World Wide Web to the real world. They may begin to doubt their suitor. When the victim says they aren't going to send any more money, the scammer may attempt to blackmail them. Sometimes during the relationship, the scammer has persuaded the victim to perform various sexual acts on a webcam. They then threaten to send those recordings to the victim's boss, their family members, and friends, or even threaten to post them on the internet if the victim doesn't send them more money. Research shows that victims who are lonely, less emotionally stable, and less culturally aware tend to experience more psychological consequences from this crime, such as depression, guilt, anger, shame, embarrassment, and fear. They feel emotionally violated. Some have described feeling mentally raped. Some victims are extremely distressed and may become suicidal. Some victims find it difficult to visualize the real criminal, even after they're shown photos of the actual perpetrator. They cannot disassociate from the mental image they have of their newfound love. They had plans for a future together, shared their innermost secrets. How can it possibly all be a lie? Victims need to be brought out of this denial as soon as possible. They need to be educated so that they're not re-victimized by a second wave of the scam. One victim I spoke with said she had called her boyfriend's business and they verified he was who he said he was. So I asked her if he had given her the number, and she said yes. And I explained that she should look up the number to the business herself and then call to verify him. She refused to do so. The victims of online romantic scams experience a double hit. First, the loss of money. Second, the loss of a relationship. Victims find it very difficult to let go. They cannot come to grips with the fact it was not a real relationship, even when they finally understand that they've been scammed. And they experience the classic stages of grief. We need to keep in mind that victims frequently report that counselors and victim service personnel are of little help because they don't understand the crime or the extent of the trauma. Professionals, including law enforcement officers, need to be aware that victims of online romance scams are extremely vulnerable. Special care needs to be taken with these victims. If possible, an officer of the same gender should break the news and take a statement from the victim. Traditional social supports, such as clergy or victim counseling, may not be applicable to these victims. It's important to provide support from health professionals as soon as possible, especially as some victims might become suicidal when they learn the truth. Although some victims receive support from loved ones, many do not. Family members are angry and upset because of the financial loss. They may call the victim stupid for falling for such a scam. Victims are also likely to blame themselves. For many, their loved ones don't help change their feelings of guilt. They just add to it. Many times, family members or friends cannot provide the support these victims need because they don't understand the intensity or the realness of the relationship. When I speak to these victims, I tell them not only are they suffering a financial loss or the loss of a romantic relationship, but their trust has also been violated, and that goes to the heart of everything. Sally's a 62-year-old widow. She lost her husband about 3 years ago. She has 2 sons. One is married, and the other is in the military. Sally and her daughter-in-law do not have a good relationship, which affects Sally's relationship with her son. Sometime after Sally lost her husband, she had a man message her on Facebook, and they became fast friends. He told her he was a businessman working overseas. They exchanged photographs and daily emails and made telephone calls. Sally really looked forward to conversations with her new friend. Before long, he began asking her for money as his was tied up. His reasons for needing money always sounded plausible. Sally lost a total of $16,000, which was her nest egg, before she realized she was being scammed. She also let several bills get behind and ran up her credit cards. When she told him she had no more money, he dumped her. Sally was referred to me by a postal inspector who was concerned over some statements she had made to him. When I spoke with her, she broke down and cried on the phone, just telling me how she thought this was going to be a new start for her, and now all of her dreams were gone. She said she couldn't tell her family because one son wasn't in the United States and the other she didn't see very often. She was very concerned over their reaction and said they would be angry. She couldn't pay her bills and she sounded desperate. I provided Sally with the Area Agency on Aging contact information. Sharon mentioned it earlier, but for those of you not familiar with the agency, it's my go-to agency. I use them first. Generally, there's several offices throughout a state which handle a specific geographic area. Usually it's a county or several if there's a low population, so they have an office near the victim. Many of them provide free financial counseling, or they can direct individuals where to find it, and also other social services if the Area Agency on Aging does not provide that service the victim needs. For Sally, I found several services that were offered by her state that I thought she would find beneficial, and I provided her with that contact information. I also told her I'd be happy to speak with her adult children if she wanted me to, that I did it for many victims, and she told me she would think about it. A couple of weeks later, I spoke with Sally, and she told me she hadn't been out of bed in 2 days. She was so depressed, and she said if it wasn't for her dog and her concern over his welfare that she would kill herself. I spent a couple of hours on the phone with her, and after a conversation, I was convinced she would not try to harm herself. I encouraged her to contact her family doctor and promised to find some counseling services for her. A couple days later, I called Sally again. She told me she was doing better, that she had been to see her doctor who had given her some antidepressants and a list of counselors she could talk with. She and I spoke several times after that. She welcomed having someone she could confide in, somebody who would give her a friendly ear to listen. Many times victims in these types of scams are lonely and socially isolated, as was Sally. Paying attention to and becoming a part of the victim's daily life is one of the tactics that scammers use to gain victims' trust and convince them that they care about them. As an advocate, using some of these same tactics are a way in with a victim. Being attentive and non-judgmental, caregivers can gain access and gain trust. Victims want to share their heartbreak with someone, but they have to be able to trust you. Although Sally was really hesitant to tell any of her children what happened, with my encouragement and my offer to help her explain it to her son, she did finally tell her youngest son what happened, and he offered to help her with her finances and got her bills caught up for her. I also helped Sally secure a Facebook page so strangers couldn't contact with her, and I gave her some additional information on what to watch out for with scams in general. I encouraged her to look for other opportunities to meet new people in her town and not on the internet, and suggested non-credit classes, volunteer work, or even a part-time job. We spoke for about a month and a half on a regular basis, once a week or so. Much of what I did was just listen. Sally went to see a counselor. She's doing well today and spending more time with her grandchildren and her sister. I think it's important to remember that majority of seniors who have lost their nest eggs have no means to recoup their losses and rebuild their savings. They have to learn to live within a scaled-down budget and transition to a lifestyle that might be less than what they're accustomed to or had planned for in their retirement. It's a difficult financial adjustment for some and can be emotionally taxing. We caution victims to expect many more bogus offers for love and lottery winnings or investment opportunities or those 2 a.m. phone calls to bail their grandkids out of foreign jails. Victims' personal details are shared with other scammers. Their names are put on sucker lists that are bought and sold. They will be tagged as vulnerable to fraudulent pitches and will be subjected to other schemes. Counseling can ease the confusion and calm the fears. If family ties are good, Families can be urged to play a bigger role in the senior's life, giving them a quick call every day to check in with them, make sure someone visits a couple times a week, encourage them to get involved in their real-world community, like a senior center, a place of worship, or a volunteer group, maybe taking a class that they've always wanted to do. Installing safeguards and checks will make it less likely that senior victims will be taken in by another fraud. There's many agencies out there, profit and nonprofit, that might be able to provide services if the family can't. Seniors Helping Seniors and similar agencies can provide companionship, light housekeeping, errand running, and a myriad of other services. The U.S. Postal Inspection Service regards consumer education as one of its top weapons in fighting fraudsters. You may be a target, but you can choose not to be a victim. It's part of our Delivering Trust, Delivering Justice campaign. We have a lot of educational material on our website, and it's also available in print, so I encourage you all to visit the Postal Inspection Service's website for that. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for attending our webinar and turn it over to Jane.
Thank you, Kathy and Sharon. Kathy, if you slide one more to the next slide. Thank you. Thank you for sharing valuable information and these very heartbreaking victim stories. I understand that we did not have a question-answer chat function. So if you have any questions, please email me at jlee@ncvc.org, and I will pass along your questions to our presenters. This webinar will be available in about a week on our website with closed captioning in about another week. So if you have any questions, email me. If you want to review or download the presentation, you may do so. And I wanted to also point out another resource available, that is our Victim Connect, and it is 1-855-4-VICTIM. That's 1-855-4-VICTIM. If you have any victims or any questions you want to refer us to, we're happy to help. Thank you again to Kathy, Sharon, and also Maria, and we will see you at our next webinar. Bye-bye, everybody.